Travel and Things, in association with Rugged Wear, Real People, Real Clothing, Real Solutions, presents In Conversation With. I'm chatting once again to clinical psychologist in private practice, Ruth Ancer, and we're talking about COVID and its related depressions. We've got 2 more episodes still. We've been doing this for the whole of February. It's the month of love, so we've got to love each other. Ruth, welcome back to you.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me.
So today's little episode, we're going to be looking at ways to cope with difficult feelings. And attached to that is, how do parents help their children if they themselves are struggling with COVID-related depressive feelings?
You know, I think that this topic is appropriate for all kinds of situations, but it's been highlighted during COVID. Because there have been so many ramifications on so many levels, we've been confronted with changes, challenges, loss, and for a lot of us, it's very difficult to cope with feelings that are overwhelming. And the most important thing is to actually be able to be self-aware and self-reflective. So to monitor when something is happening that you can feel that something is different. And I think that we're so used to being told to just carry on, be strong, be resilient. And especially with there was a lot of emphasis initially with, use this lockdown time to learn a new language and get a new hobby and declutter your house. And for a lot of people, they felt there was this expectation that they had to now be functioning optimally, and they had to have achieved and finished their PhD that they've spent 7 years avoiding. And that was, for some people, they managed, and lots of sour bread banana bread got made. But for most of us, it was a time where we would have been very disappointed with ourselves. And it is important to remember that this was a time when the world was changing and there was so much uncertainty. And a lot of us were worried about our incomes and what was going to happen. And I think that perhaps people didn't feel the room to actually acknowledge how difficult things were. So now, 2 years later, we're seeing the impact, because we are seeing, as I mentioned before, a lot of people have developed symptoms of anxiety, depression, and either a recurrence or new developments. So the most important thing when you've got overwhelming, distressing feelings is to be able to take time out and work out what is going on. If you suddenly find that you are fighting with your partner, or you are lacking motivation, or you just are withdrawn and don't want to do anything, it's important to try and work out and identify what is happening. Because being able to identify and then articulate what the feelings are is the first step to being able to process them. I think this myth in our society that crying is a sign of weakness, and that if you talk about that you're not coping, that means that you're a failure, is very unfortunate, because it means that we bottle feelings up, and instead of examining them, dealing with them, expressing them, they get buried, and then they come out either somatically, where we get sick and we get ill because our immune systems are low, or there are a lot of stress-induced diseases, or it starts affecting our relationships. So a lot of the times when we see children acting out, or partners being more either withdrawn or more aggressive, if we go down to what's happening, it's often because there are unexpressed feelings of self-doubt, loss of confidence, grief, despair, frustration, insecurity. So the first step is being able to take a step back and identify what's going on, and then find a safe place to express it, ideally in words. But if you can't through a lot of the times people exercise and they feel that that is a release, or through something creative. But I think very important is the sense of connection to other people. So to find someone that you're comfortable with and that you trust, to be able to talk. People feel so much relief when there's someone that they can express feelings to. You know, I get people who come into my office who haven't been in therapy, and they'll speak, and initially I might not have to say much or intervene, but afterwards they say, you know, they apologize. First of all, I'm so sorry, I'm tearful. You know, if you can't be tearful in a therapist's office, where can you be tearful? And they show initially a lot of discomfort, perhaps, with being so vulnerable. But the amount of people who afterwards will say, I'm not sure why, but I feel better. I feel relief. And it's because they've been given a space where they can speak about things that are just really difficult. It's very hard to carry around feelings that just feel like a big mess. So being able to express them is one thing. And then being able to try and understand, because sometimes when you have these distressing feelings, you don't get a perspective. So it's important to then be able to see how those feelings and how the situation, are those feelings realistic? Are they distorted? Because sometimes you can just, the way that you see the world can be, you know, we see the world through different lenses. And sometimes when we're feeling bad about ourselves or feeling miserable, it feels that nothing's working out. And sometimes to be able to speak to someone and get a perspective is very helpful. And there are various ways. Yeah.
Is the opposite not also true? Where children could look out for see how their parents are feeling and maybe ask them how they're dealing with things. I'm not talking about a 16-year-old, but if you've got an 18-year-old matric student in your house, I'm sure they're capable of asking the right questions, or at least expressing interest in how the parent is feeling.
Oh, absolutely. I think that a lot of our children are more emotionally in touch than we are, in terms of being able to feel it's okay to be expressive. Certainly some of our teenagers are highly expressive. Sometimes their feelings are expressed in an incredibly exaggerated way. But I think that is important. And also role modeling for your children, that you don't always have to be okay. So creating conversations about when, you know, and I'm not talking about using your 18 or 16 or 12-year-old children as, you know, your therapists or your confidants, but being able to say, you know, I've had a rough day, I'm feeling really overwhelmed. It's okay, because it gives them permission. It's important that they don't feel they're responsible for your happiness or for fixing it for you, but certainly for being able to acknowledge that sometimes feelings are difficult, because until we can acknowledge it, we don't realize that we can survive the difficult feelings. And I think that's the key, is that often people don't want to go there because they think they won't survive the feelings. But only once you've been able to express, articulate, process them, do you realize that feelings come, but feelings also go. And we need to be able to trust in our ability to survive difficult feelings.
Ruth, thank you so very much for taking time out to join me once again. We've got one more episode coming up where we're going to wrap up everything that you've shared with us on how to deal with this. And thank you very much once again. And before I say goodbye, we've got to go back to the marketplace. Rugged wear, real people, real clothing, real solutions. Ruth Ancer, who's a clinical psychologist in private practice, once again, thanks very much for being my guest on In Conversation With.
Thanks.